Imagine waking up one morning and everybody suddenly realized that they can't remember their names. What do you think would happen? Let's find out in this interesting story. The people of Umoji like to say that a person's name was the first gift given by the world. Before a child could walk, before a child could talk, before a child could even lose a tooth, that child already had a name carrying a story. Some names spoke of joy, some spoke of hardship. Others carried the memory of grandparents whose photographs hung crookedly on the mud walls. In Umoji, names were important. A man could forget where he left his cutlass after drinking too much palm wine. A woman could forget the pot she placed on the fire while gossiping with neighbors. A child could forget every chore given by his mother within 3 minutes. Such things happen every day. Nobody worried about them. What nobody imagined was that an entire village could wake up one morning and forget the one thing they have carried since birth. The trouble began on Tuesday. It was a kind of trouble that arrived quietly. The sun had barely climbed over the tall palm trees. Roasters compete with one another as though a prize awaited the loudest bird. Smoke drifted from kitchen huts where women prepared breakfast. Gold wandered freely through compounds looking for trouble, which happened to be their favorite activity. An old palm wine tapper sat beneath a mango tree in front of his house. He was a thin man whose back had bent after years of climbing trees. His face carried enough wrinkles to tell several lifetimes of stories. Every morning he followed the same routine. He woke before sunrise, stretched his tired bones, and complained about his skin. Then reminded everybody nearby that people no longer respected old age. That morning seemed no different. He finished washing his face, sat on a wooden stool, then heard his wife calling from inside the house. "My husband, have you eaten?" The old man smiled. "I am coming." He stood up, took 2 steps, then stopped. A strange feeling settled over him. He knew he was her husband. He knew she had been his wife for more than 40 years. He knew the names of all their children. He remembered where he had hidden money from her 3 years earlier. But yet, he could not remember his own name. Then he frowned. Perhaps old age had finally arrived carrying a basket of problems. He scratched his head. Nothing came. He scratched harder. Still, nothing came. His name had disappeared as neatly as a chicken stolen by a hungry fox. The old man rushed into the house. "Woman," he shouted. His wife looked up from the pot she was stirring. "Why are you shouting like somebody who had seen a ghost?" Then the old man pointed at himself. "What is my name?" His wife laughed so hard that the spoon fell off from her hand. "Have you started drinking already?" "Woman, I am serious." She wiped tears from her eyes. "You want me to tell you your own name?" "Yes." She opened her mouth confidently. Then she froze. The smile vanished. The spoon dropped again. For several seconds, she stared at her husband as though he had suddenly grown a second head. "What is wrong?" he asked. She blinked twice. I don't know." The old man felt cold despite the morning heat. "And what do you mean by you don't know?" The woman grabbed her wrapper. "I know you are my husband." "Good." "I know you climb palm trees." "Very good." "I know you snore like a broken bicycle." "That's not important." She pointed at him helplessly. "But I cannot remember your name." The two stared at each other. Neither of them spoke. A goat wandered into the house, ate a piece of yam, from a boil, then left. Unusually, they would have chased it away, but this time they barely noticed. News spreads quickly. In villages, bad news travels faster than a bicycle rolling downhill. Before the sun reached the middle of the sky, similar stories emerged from every corner of Umoji. A trader could not remember her name. A farmer could not remember his. Children stared blankly whenever teachers asked them to introduce themselves. Even the village chief discovered he had forgotten the name he had answered to his entire life. Confusion turned into panic. The primary school became the loudest place in the village. One teacher stood before a class full of pupils. "Let us begin attendance," she announced. The children nodded. She opened her register. The first name on the list stared back at her. It looked familiar, very familiar, yet it might as well have been written in the language of birds. The teacher pointed at the boy sitting near the window. "Is this your name?" The boy looked at the register. "I do not know." She pointed at another pupil. "What about this one?" "It could be." The teacher sighed. A small boy raised his hand. "Teacher, yes?" "If none of us knows our names, can we go home?" The entire class cheered. The teacher nearly cried. At the village square, elders gathered beneath a large tree. Nobody knew what to do. One elder blamed angry ancestors. Another blamed modern technology, despite having no idea how technology worked. The third person blamed politicians, because he usually blamed politicians for everything, including bad weather. Meanwhile, arguments erupted throughout the village. A woman called to her husband from across a compound. "Come here." 3 men arrived. The woman frowned. "I was calling my husband." One man frowned back. "How do you know I am not your husband?" The woman picked up a broom and the discussion ended immediately. At the health clinic, Nurse Chika spent the morning listening to increasingly ridiculous complaints. One man claimed a mosquito had bitten his memory. Another insisted that imported rice was responsible. A third person blamed his mother-in-law. When Chika asked how his mother-in-law could erase an entire village names, the man replied confidently that she was capable of many terrible things. By afternoon, laughter and fear mixed together in an equal measure. People still recognize faces. They remember birthdays, weddings, arguments, deaths, family histories, favorite foods, embarrassing childhood memories. But only names had vanished. The situation became even more stranger when villagers searched through old documents. Birth certificates remained untouched. Marriage records remained untouched. School registers remained untouched. Names appeared very clearly on every page. Yet, whenever someone read them, they felt disconnected. The names looked like they belonged to strangers living far away. A person could stare directly at his own name without realizing it was his. And that discovery frightened everyone. At sunset, the village chief called an emergency meeting. Hundreds of villagers gathered in the square. Faces carry worry. Voices tremble. Nobody laughed anymore. The chief stood before the crowd. Usually, his presence inspired confidence, but that evening, he looked as confused as everybody else. "My people," he began. 100 rose immediately. The chief pointed at the man. "What is it?" The man cleared his throat. "If all of us have forgotten our names, how do we know you are really the chief?" For a moment, nobody spoke. Then several villagers nodded. It was a reasonable question. The chief opened his mouth, but no answer came. For the first time in his life, he could not prove who he was. Silence settled all over the gathering. Children stopped laughing. Women exchanged worried glances. Even the goat seemed unusually quiet. And as darkness covered Umoji, a feeling spread through the village that something bigger than forgetting names had arrived. Nobody knew where it came from, and nobody knew whether it will leave. Yet, every person sensed the same thing. The problem was no longer about memory. Somewhere beneath the confusion lay a secret waiting patiently to reveal itself. The next morning arrived carrying more questions than answers. Usually, the people of Umoji woke with purpose. Farmers hurried to their field before the sun became fierce. Women swept their compound while discussing matters that somehow concerned every household in the village. Children prepared for school, though many behaved as if education were a punishment invented by wicked adults. On this morning, however, nobody seemed eager to begin the day. The village square filled early. Groups gathered beneath trees, beside the market halls, near compounds, around cooking fires, everybody discussing the same thing. I still cannot remember my name. Neither could anyone else. The strange condition had not disappeared overnight as some had hoped. Instead, it seemed stronger. People now spoke cautiously, afraid that something worse might happen if they talked too much about it. Old Ezani sat beneath the ancient Udala tree, surrounded by elders whose faces looked as wrinkled as dried coconuts. I warned this village many times, he declared. Nobody knew exactly what he had warned them about, because Ezani warned people about everything. He warned them about loud music, modern clothes, motorcycles, government officials, imported biscuits, football matches, plastic buckets, solar panels, sleeping after breakfast, sleeping before breakfast, and once even warned against smiling too much. One elder nodded solemnly. You are right. What exactly was I right about? Ezani asked. The elder scratched his head. I cannot remember. The gathering felt silent. A young man standing nearby laughed so hard and nearly fell from a wooden chair. At the health clinic, Nurse Chika faced a line of villagers stretching almost to the road. Most carrying no illness except confusion. One woman marched inside, holding her husband by the ear. Nurse, please examine this man. Chika looked up. What is wrong with him? The woman folded her arms. He claims forgetting names has improved our marriage. The husband grinned. It is true. But how? The woman glared at him. The man pointed proudly at his chest. Before this problem, she called me lazy every day. The woman opened her mouth. Her husband quickly continued. Now she cannot remember the name she used when insulting me. Several patients burst into laughter. Even Chika struggled to keep a straight face. By midday, arguments had begun appearing throughout Umoji like mushrooms after heavy rainfall. The first serious quarrel erupted over a farmland. A wealthy trader, known for loving money, almost as much as he loved breathing, arrived at a disputed piece of land, carrying several witnesses. This farm belongs to my family, he announced. A farmer standing nearby frowned. No, it belongs to mine. Can you prove it? The farmer hesitated. Normally, he would have listed generations of family history. Normally, he would have named fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers. Now, those names sat somewhere beyond reach. The trader smiled. You see, The farmer's face darkened. You know very well that this land is ours. Then prove it. Within minutes, both men shouted loud enough to frighten birds from nearby trees. Such disputes multiplied across the village. Old agreement became uncertain. Promises became difficult to verify. Stories that everybody accepted yesterday suddenly became open for debate. It was as if someone had removed the labels from every bottle in a shop, leaving people to guess what remained inside. Among those watching this development closely was Adeze, the school teacher. Unlike many villagers, she disliked jumping to conclusions. When people blamed angry spirits, she listened. When others blamed government chemicals, she listened. When somebody blamed a goat, she listened to that too. Then she asked questions. Questions often reveal more than answers. That afternoon, she sat beneath a mango tree with Chika. Nearby children played a game that had become popular since the disaster began. They pointed at one another while inventing new names. One boy answered only to Captain Thunder. Another one insisted that everybody should call him Chief of Biscuits. A girl announced that she was now Queen of Rice. Nobody could stop them because nobody knew their real names. Adeze watched them. Children adapt very quickly. Chika smiled. They're enjoying this more than the adults. Adeze nodded. Because adults know what can be lost. Before Chika could reply, a bicycle rolled into the village square, carrying a visitor from the city. Dawes followed behind him like a royal servant. The rider removed his helmet. Several villagers recognized him immediately. He was Obi, a journalist whose childhood had begun in Umoji before war carried him elsewhere. Unlike the villagers, Obi remembered everybody's name perfectly. Within minutes, he found himself surrounded by anxious people. "What is my name?" one man demanded. Obi answered. The man stared blankly. It sounded familiar, but yet it felt no more personal than the name of a stranger living in another country. A woman pushed forward. "What about me?" Obi told her. She shook her head. "No, that cannot be right." "It's right." "It does not feel right." And soon, dozens of villagers gathered around him. The scene became almost comical. Obi answered until sweat covered his face. At last, he raised both hands. "Please stop. I have only one mouth." The crowd reluctantly stepped back. That evening, Obi joined Adeze and Chika outside the school building. The three sat together while the sun painted the sky orange. Obi listened carefully as they described everything that had happened. And when they finished, he remained silent for several moments. "What are you thinking?" Chika asked. Obi leaned forward. "I think we are asking the wrong question." Adeze raised her eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Everybody keeps asking why my name disappeared." That seems important. But that seems important. It is important, Obi replied. Perhaps we should ask why only names disappeared. The statement lingered between them. Adeze considered it carefully. People remembered their houses. They remembered their farms. They remembered their childhood stories. They remembered their family secrets. And one old man still remembered a quarrel from 38 years ago. Nobody has forgotten anything else except names. And so the selectiveness made little sense. Before they could continue, an elderly widow approached slowly. The woman carried a bundle beneath one arm. Her eyes looked tired. "Teacher," she said softly, Adaeze stood. What is wrong? The widow sat beside them. My husband's brothers want me to leave my house. Chika frowned. Why? They claim I cannot prove I was married into the family. Obi looked very shocked. But everybody knows you were. The widow smiled sadly. Knowing is no longer enough. She opened the bundle. Inside were old photographs, marriage documents, faded letters. Proof of a life spent beside a man who now buried beneath the earth. Yet, each document contained names that no longer felt connected to real people. The widow's voice trembled. They say the house belongs elsewhere. At this point, nobody spoke. For the first time, the true danger became clear. The loss of names was not merely strange. It was becoming useful. Useful to greedy people, useful to dishonest people, useful to those who wish history had happened differently. Over the next few days, more stories emerged. A death suddenly vanished because nobody could identify who owed whom. A businessman attempted to claim ownership of gold that clearly belonged to somebody else. One ambitious young man nearly convinced 3 women that he was their cousin until their mothers chased him away with sticks. The villagers laughed at such incidents. Yet beneath the laughter sat growing fear. Then Adaeze discovered something unexpected. While reviewing old school records, she noticed that visitors entering Umoji remained unaffected. The government workers visiting from other towns remembered names perfectly. A trader passing through the village remembered names perfectly. A bus driver stopping briefly for passengers remembered names perfectly. Only permanent residents suffer from this strange condition. And that evening, she shared her discovery with Obi and Chika. And the 3 sat quietly. The village around them buzzed with nervous conversation. If visitors remember names, Chika said slowly, then whatever is happening belongs to Umoji. Obi nodded. Exactly. Adaeze stared toward the distant council hall. A thought had begun forming in her mind. It was small, barely visible, yet it refused to leave. What if this is not about memory loss at all? She asked. Neither of them answered. At that moment, drums sounded from the village square. A government official had arrived carrying registration record from the district office. People rushed toward the gathering. The official climbed a wooden platform. I have the names of every registered resident. Hope flashed across hundreds of faces. Perhaps this will solve everything. And perhaps hearing their names will break whatever spell, illness or madness had settled upon the village. The official unfolded several papers. Then he began reading. One by one, the names echoed across the square. Men listened, women listened, children listened. Each name sounded clear. Each name sounded familiar. Yet, no face lit up with recognition. No heart responded. No memory awakened. The names floated through the crowd like strangers searching for a home. When the reading ended, silence swallowed the square. A baby cried somewhere in the darkness. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. And for the first time since this disaster began, genuine panic spread through Umoji. And then the people suddenly understood that they had not merely forgotten their names, but their names had somehow forgotten them.